Good morning, and thanks for joining me today. I'm going to talk about employee experience and expectations, what's important to your employees. Before I start the presentation, let me just bring your attention to our safe harbor statement and remind you that this session is subject to safe harbor. So my name is Richard Doherty, and I am Senior Director for Solution Marketing at Workday. I'm based in London. I just wish I could have been in Oslo with you today. Sadly not, but perhaps next time. I've worked at Workday for coming up to 7 years, and I've also worked in the HR technology space for the last just over 20 years, in fact, so quite a while. Now, I don't need to tell you this. Clearly, everyone is telling you this in every presentation. 2020 and 2021 have had far-reaching implications on every single one of us. Many workers shifted almost overnight, it felt like, from working in an office Monday to Friday to working from home Monday to Friday. And this whole sort of work-life balance, came under significant pressure as many of us found ourselves working longer and longer hours. We also transformed that shift to working from home, and the implications of the pandemic changed how our organizations operated. Sometimes they even changed what our organizations did, and they certainly had implications on our roles, our jobs. And we often, speaking for myself as well, we've had to pick up new skills to operate in this more virtual environment. And then as well, I think we've become more aware from an environmental perspective. With climate change, I think that's the top of many people's agenda now, and organizations' agenda around sustainability, but also from socially. Our organizations and also employees have become more socially aware. And a lot of that was triggered by events in North America last year with George Floyd. His tragic death or murder, I think, has made many of us and our organizations reevaluate the importance of diversity, inclusion, and equity. Now, wouldn't it be great to really understand your workforce's sentiment? What are they thinking? What are they feeling? What are their priorities? What are their expectations? And that's exactly what we're able to do at Workday now. Earlier this year, we acquired a company called Peakon, which is an employee listening platform. So survey, very clever, not just sort of an annual survey, but sort of continuous, regular, couple of questions here, couple of questions there. It uses AI and machine learning to make sure the questions are relevant to each individual that they are sent to. But basically in 2020, we our customers received over 165 million survey responses. And some of these surveys, it's you select a radio button or you check a checkbox, but you also have the opportunity to enter some comments in text boxes. And we received, or our customers received, more than 30 million comments as part of the survey responses. And we've used natural language processing to sift through and scan all of those 30 million responses to look for patterns. What are people talking about? What does the sentiment look like? And these responses have come from more than 160 countries, and actually with a large proportion of those responses actually coming from within Europe, as Peakon, before it was acquired by Workday, was a sort of a Danish, UK headquartered organization, so a European solution technology company. And the results of the analysis of that is all anonymized, obviously, at the level we're talking about here. But the analysis of those 165 million survey responses, those 30 million comments, it has been documented in the Employee Expectations Report for 2021. So if you just Google Employee Expectations Report 2021 Peakon, you'll be guided to a site where you can download free of charge that report. And there's some interesting reading in there. But I'm going to provide you with some of the highlights in the next 10 minutes or so. So, you all have heard of the Great Resignation. And, depending upon which report or which commentator you listen to, could be more than 50% of your workforce are about to resign. Now, according to our analysis of the data from these surveys and looking at the attributes of employees who actually ended up resigning, we can see that 27% of current employees are exhibiting those same attributes or behaviors compared to those employees who have already left. So suggesting that just over a quarter of the workforce are actually thinking or perhaps actively working to leave your organization. So that's okay, it's not 50%, but it's 1 in 4. So that would have serious implications on your organization. So wouldn't it be great if you understood, the sentiment of the workforce, and then you could design an employee experience, you could focus on the employee experience to help reduce those risks of regrettable losses to your organization. So now I'm going to replay to you from that 2021 Employee Expectations Report 4 key areas where we think you need to focus as organizations based upon the employee sentiment. So the first one is around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Employees left 38% more comments about diversity, equity, and inclusion in 2020 than they did in the previous year. And we can see that there was a real spike in comments linked to this topic area around the time of George Floyd's murder. So you really need to focus on creating a culture of equity, fairness, diversity, and inclusion. Excuse me. This second key area of concern for employees, probably not that surprising, is around health and well-being. And we can see that the data shows that employee comments concerning well-being increased 46% in 2020 compared to the previous year, clearly linked to the pandemic that we've all been living through. What surprised me was that it was actually mental health that was top of mind for employees rather than physical well-being. So they're not so worried about perhaps catching COVID, more worried about the impact perhaps of working from home, feeling isolated, the pressures of a pandemic, the pressures of transformation. So mental health was a concern for employees and something that you need to consider and perhaps develop programs to support your employees around. Now, flexible working, another key area for employees, and the comments concerning flexible working increased in 2020 by 125% compared to the previous year. And I think in 2021, for the data which we'll look at the beginning of next year, I wouldn't be surprised if that trend has been increased. So more focus now on flexible working than even in 2020. And I think managers have had to learn how to manage virtual teams. Employees have struggled to maintain a work-life balance because of this hybrid working. And you've got to ask the question, how have you supported your employees? And this isn't going to go away. As we plan a return to the workplace, or perhaps you're already in the workplace and you're thinking about what does hybrid working look like for your organization, what are the policies we're going to implement, and so on and so forth. You really need to understand the sentiment of the employees around flexible working as you seek to design how your organization operates in the future. Growth. Now, growth is really important. When I talk about growth, we're talking about professional development. And growth is a key predictor in PCONs, which is that employee survey solution that Workday, it's part of Workday now. Growth is a key predictor in PCON's attrition algorithm. And it's all about employees developing professionally, developing new skills and growing in their careers. And you can see from the graph here that there was an initial surge. Actually, the feeling about I'm growing increased as the pandemic hit, and I think that's probably linked to the fact that people were having to shifting to working from home, picking up new skills, probably having to adapt the way they work, so they felt that they were growing professionally. But then, after a few months, we've just seen a steady decrease in the scores against growth from employees, and which would suggest as a general stagnation in professional development, which will increase that flight risk because it's linked to attrition. And also, interestingly, when we broke the data down by age grouping for our Gen Z and millennials, the growth scores have been declining throughout 2020. So there definitely seems to be an age divide as For the Gen X and the boomers, not such an issue, as they feel that they're still growing. So we need to make sure that your strategies reflect the different needs of your workforce as you seek to help them develop, even within a very difficult situation. So in summary, the data is showing us 4 key areas for action: diversity, equity and inclusion, health and well-being, particularly on mental health, flexible working. As we go back to hybrid working, it's becoming even hotter and hotter topic, so you need to have a clear strategy for that. And then finally, growth. You really need to focus on professional development for your employees, and the younger elements of the workforce, that seems to be more important than the older ones. So, how can the employee experience help? Well, employee experience needs to address those employee expectations I've talked through, and a whole load of other expectations. And I like to think of the employee experience in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I know has been slightly discredited in certain academic circles, but it's still useful. And we need, the employee experience needs to satisfy the basic needs of the employees first, at the bottom level of the hierarchy, to be able to progress, or for the employees to progress to the higher levels that we see in Maslow's hierarchy, up until they get to self-actualization, where they are, they're achieving their potential, they're performing well, they're fully engaged, which is where we want all our employees to be. And if we can get our employees at that status, at that level, then they're really unlikely to want to leave your organization, because you're providing them, you're satisfying all their needs. But if you're not, if they're stuck at the bottom levels of that hierarchy, then the Great Resignation may become a bit of an issue for you. Now, employee experience covers a broad combination of factors, from things like your culture of your organization, to your compensation strategy, to your leadership, to also HR technology. And obviously that's someone from Workday. HR technology is my focus area. So let's focus on that now. And how can HR tech help satisfy the needs as expressed by Maslow? And here I have a sort of a Workday version of Maslow's hierarchy. So at the lowest level, we're calling engaged. You need to get employees engaged and using your HR system. And how do you do that? By making it easy for them to see their pay slip, to book their holiday, making it easy to access the system, maybe via a mobile app, or perhaps through collaboration tools where they're operating all the time, things like Microsoft Teams. Now, once you've achieved that, the next level is to empathize with the employee by helping to ensure their physical and mental well-being. How do you do that? Let's make sure you have great benefits programs for healthcare, counseling for their mental health, and listening to them, and trying to understand the sentiment, but responding to that feedback that you receive. Don't just ask for feedback and do nothing. Technology will help there as well. Next, we need to help, do our best to make the employee feel embraced by your organization. And how do we do that? Well, we start by understanding, where you are as an organization from a diversity, inclusion, and equity perspective. Once you know where you are, you can then build out a plan and strategy to get where you want to be. And that all requires lots of data around the structure of your organization, the sentiment of the employees. So you need to gather all this data to be able to embrace the employees and build out a strategy that works. Next, you need to empower your employees so that they can take control of their careers, guide their development, and open up opportunity to them. And you need technology to do that. It's not up to the manager. You need enabling technology that allows employees to take control. And if you can do all of that, employees will become energized, and they'll be high performing, and they'll achieve their potential. That's the goal. And by satisfying those needs at each step in that pyramid, you've got much better chance of really getting your employees to realize their potential, which is good for them and good for your organization. And the most important ingredient for you as an organization to deliver that fantastic employee experience is by having access to the underlying HR transactional and talent data, so that you can leverage that data to drive an intelligent and personalized employee experience. Because employee experience is not just about workflow, it's so much more than that, as I've just explained. So thank you very much. Let me now hand back to the stage to continue the discussion on employee experience with some practical insight into Nor Consult's employee experience journey. Thank you.